Hey guys, welcome to Gaming for Immersion and another in the series showcasing some of the less well-known mods that add either realism or theme or challenge to the game. This one adds a bit of all three, so I just had to cover it. Anyway, my name is Michael and I'm pretty excited about this one. First things first, I need to give a shout out to Vraho Assassin, apologies for the pronunciation there, for bringing this mod to my attention. This is a good time to say please do make suggestions or whatever else in the comments section. This is not the first time I've checked out a mod or tried something out based on your feedback. It also helps the almighty YouTube algorithm, which helps me out. Alright then, let's get into this. And this is the kind of mod that gets me excited. Can you tell this is my excited voice? Anyway, I love seeing fresh approaches to overhauling the game, and yes, there are enough changes here that I would certainly call it an overhaul, although to be clear, it's not on the same scale as something like SFO. Anyway, there is a lot that I really like about this one, but there are also a few things I don't care for that I will get into here in a minute. I'm going to go through all the highlighted changes the mod does with respect to campaign, then battles, then siege battles, starting with the words of the mod author himself and then showing my own experiences. I'll try to give plenty of detail, but in the interest of saving you time, if all you want to know is my conclusion, here's how I would summarize things. 1. It's very much an overhaul that makes the game more challenging, most of which I like, and a little of which I don't. 2. This mod does some of the same things I've talked about in other videos, such as making wall climbing more difficult and reducing replenishment rates, so yes, I love that about it. And 3, for most players, I don't recommend playing this on Legendary difficulty, at least until you learn some of the nuances of the changes. But overall, I think it adds some refreshing takes on the game. If you're looking to try something fresh, I think it's worth your while to give it a shot. Okay, so as I alluded to, this is actually an amalgam of 3 mods, each making changes to one aspect of the game: campaign, battles, and siege battles. There are also different versions to choose from, depending on whether you use vanilla minor settlements or the tier 4 or tier 5 minor settlement mods. I don't use tier 4 or tier 5 minor settlements, so all my testing was with the vanilla version. So let's dive right into what this mod does, starting with the campaign changes. Alright, so very quickly then, what the mod does: artillery, chance of capturing enemy artillery is very much increased. Trait limit, characters can now have up to 500 traits, pretty significant, hard to imagine ever beating that threshold there. Supplies, defensive supplies have been increased and added to settlements and walls. Walls will also provide supplies of ammunition for the defender. Tier 3 wall defense buildings and minor settlements will make them walled sieges again. Tier 2 will remain as minor settlement battles. Replenishment, all sources of replenishment have been decreased by 50% to prevent fully healed armies over a single turn. Absolutely love it. AI minor factions now have the same parameters as major factions, fighting and expanding on equal terms. Some of you may not care for that. Others, I think, will probably like that. Garrisons. Garrison regiments will receive 1 rank of experience every 10 turns, reflecting a year of drills and training. This is one thing that I think is maybe a little bit too aggressive in the mod. I believe it's following the same approach basically as the one that adds an extra rank every 10 turns, I think it is. Or maybe it adds just like a chunk of experience every 10 turns. Anyway, every 4 turns, I feel like this is a little bit on the aggressive side. It kind of reinforces that that notion that I don't really like about Warhammer 3, which is that it's a fast campaign that can be over with quickly. But anyway, that's obviously, subjective. Each person can make up their own mind about that. And even for me, it's a pretty minor thing. Public order. Positive and negative public order effects are more severe / rewarding. Negative will actually hurt you now if you do not address it. Positive gives small buffs to movement, ambush, reinforcement, etc. As a well-fed, paid army moves more willingly and knows the land. I'm going to talk a lot more about public order when I jump into the campaign and show how exactly this impacted me. I have a lot to say about that. Stalk Stance is now an option for Wood Elf factions Crooked Moon, that being Skarsnik, Oxyotl, and Marcus Wolfhart. Mercenaries or Regiment of Renowned Regiments. All Regiments of Renowned Regiments had their recruitment cost and upkeep raised by 50% to showcase them as mercenaries. Some factions where it made sense with a tavern, brothel, graveyard, or raiding building has 6 to 8 different Regiments of Renown for hire. These RORs are picked to make sense as mercenaries, the regions and fun new takes on rosters lacking these types. Each ROR can only be hired one at a time. Once wiped, they return for hire again. So I will show some examples of that as well. In fact, most of this stuff I'll show examples of. Ogre camps, a wide variety of ogre units are now available for hire in new ogre camps. Each ogre camp has a fixed number of units available, so use them wisely. Despite the fact that each unit has a percentage marker, they will not replenish, not unless I somehow get a script for it. So this sounds like something that the mod author is going to perhaps keep working on. Ogre aversion towards all factions have been set to -20 and vice versa towards ogres, since ogres are mercenaries willing to plunder and eat all without prejudice. Auxiliary regiments here, allied units per army has been increased to 8. Ogre units per army has been increased to 8. This is to somewhat showcase that auxiliary regiments often took up a great part of an army. I don't know about Warhammer lore, but that's certainly true in many, many wars throughout history. Anyway, rebels via corruption. Going to have a lot more to say about rebellions as well coming up in my examples, but here we have the mod author's words himself. Chaos Corruption spawns Beastmen Rebels instead of Warriors of Chaos. Corruption Rebel armies now have access to the respective full rosters, including Regiments of Renowned. Corruption Rebel army types are Nurgle, Khorne, Slaanesh, Tzeentch, Vampires, Chaos, and Skaven, respectively. Okay, so those are all of the campaign changes that the mod author felt necessary to highlight. So let's now go ahead and talk about my own experience. The first observation that I want to reinforce here is that I do not recommend playing this mod on Legendary Campaign difficulty for a reason that will become very clear in a moment. To be honest, I'm not sure how I feel about that because I've been playing Legendary difficulty almost exclusively since Warhammer 1. So it may just be a habitual revulsion that comes over me when I think about playing on anything less, but chances are most of you won't feel the same way. So let's move past that and talk about how the changes I just read out loud impact your campaign. The first thing you'll see here with Skarsnik, and the reason why I chose him as one of the factions I tested with, is because he has access to a new stance, Stalk, which gives him a chance to ambush when attacking, just like the Skaven can. Again, Wood Elves, Oxyotl, and Marcus get this as well. I kind of wish it were more terrain dependent, like Wood Elves can ambush inside forests and Skarsnik in mountain passes, but that's probably impossible for a modder to do. The next thing you'll notice when playing certain factions is the increased unit size. Here we see higher model counts than the Greenskins have in vanilla. This change is actually listed in the battle changes page, not the campaign changes, but I'm showing it here because it does jump out. Moving on a little later, you can also see a few more differences. Replenishment is halved, which I thoroughly approve of, making casualties suffered in battle much more meaningful, along with incentivizing you to pay more attention to traits and technologies and plague symptoms and all kinds of things that you might normally ignore, or at least undervalue. Making deeper, more meaningful choices by the player is pretty much always something I'll approve of. We also have this new recruitment of mercenaries units that I mentioned, activated by this building that is mutually exclusive with your main economy building. So you can only build one or the other. I love this take on mercenaries and the additional options it opens up for the player. This brings us to control, and I want to spend a minute on this because it's really important and one of the biggest changes the mod makes, and it's also the reason I recommend not playing on Legendary difficulty unless you've really thought through what you're getting into. So, level of control has a much more dramatic effect on the province in this mod than it does in vanilla. I think this is a good thing for the most part. I've always thought public order was a relatively flimsy mechanic in vanilla. You could let the public order drop lower and lower without any real consequences that were worth worrying about, all the way until it reached minus 100. And of course, it often self-corrected without any intervention by the player anyway. Not to mention, it was often preferable to allow a rebellion to happen for various reasons. So basically, overall, not a great mechanic. Now, campaign realism changes that. There are a bunch of debuffs your province suffers from as public order drops below 25, and they get increasingly worse with each successive drop in level of control. All of this I'm totally on board with, by the way. But the thing I want to call particular attention to is the difference in how this overhaul handles the cumulative penalties to public order, which when you go downward is the reverse impact compared to vanilla. Meaning letting your public order get below minus 25 adds additional negatives turn after turn instead of positives like the vanilla self-correcting effect. Those penalties reach minus 6 at the second worst level and minus 8 at the worst, leading to a vicious cycle of permanent unrest and rebellion. In this example, I allowed the province to rebel to illustrate what I mean. Yes, you get the plus 20 to public order when the rebellion first happens, and incidentally, I'll talk a little bit more on that rebel army in just a moment. But once that rebellion buff disappears, and with all the minuses of legendary difficulty, it's literally impossible to ever get public order in this province under control. I could build the control building in every settlement, and the minuses still outweigh the positives. And this is my home starting province. Imagine how much worse it can get with expansion and provinces where you only own a single settlement. My own personal opinion is that all the other debuffs should be kept, but the modifier to public order should be dropped completely. Just get rid of it. It's not necessary to achieve the goal of making control more meaningful, and it's debatable whether it's genuinely realistic. I totally get that the vanilla self-correcting bonus isn't realistic either. I just don't think we need public order to spin so wildly out of control like this without any effective way for a player to address the problem other than making sure it never becomes a problem to begin with. Alright, so let's talk about the other concern I have here. The rebel army that spawned is small, but ridiculously strong compared to a starting army. Flame cannons, doom seekers, gyro bombers, and this is the first turn after it spawned. I had no choice but to attack it right away because even a single turn of additional recruiting to the rebel army would have made it stronger than all of my forces combined. Dealing with the rebellion is exacerbated by the control penalty, causing your own recruitment to take additional turns. So again, we would have been in a vicious cycle of rebels appearing that are perpetually too strong to contend with. I looked through the mod notes and didn't see anything about rebels being harder than normal, so I'm not sure if this is an anomaly or not. I like a challenge, but this felt like too much even for me. The good news is that it's pretty much my only complaint with the campaign realism mod. So let's move on to the battles. I'm going to let battle footage play out in the background while I read through these changes. Again, there are a lot of them, and I think it might get boring to stare at an image of a mod page description, but I do encourage you to read through them for yourself. So, what the mod does. Ranged options. First firing option on every unit is the vanilla one, completely unchanged from vanilla. It's just a custom icon. But then there are lots of new ranged options added to offer more strategic and fun possibilities. The new options are made for different strategic preferences, whether this be infantry, monsters, single entities, or a final burst before melee ensues or heavy flanking attacks. Play around with them, which I agree with. Some of the variants are very powerful. Be wary of friendly fire and enemy artillery. Melee options. Formations for melee units capable of performing such advanced moves. Monster abilities. All troll units have a puking ability. All giant units have a farting ability. All Ragnarok units have a web ability. Drake Gun. Dwarf Drake Gun Flame has been reverted to the Warhammer 2 look. Throwing weapons. All javelin units will add a hobble effect upon contact. all axe-throwing units will add a rattle effect upon contact. Marksmanship. This is really important. I think it affects just about everything. Values have been lowered on almost all ranged units to get a wider, more unprecise spread of projectiles. Once they rank up, precision and effect will increase. Veterancy matters now. Sound effects. Powerful sounds have been added to a lot of ranged units like cannons, steam tanks, slings, crossbows, rifles, wagons, jezzails, rattlings, and more. All sounds are vanilla from other units. Flying. Fly speed, turn rate, and acceleration deceleration speeds has been slightly increased to reflect that flight is faster. This affects all vanilla flying units and mounts and does not impair their ability to chase down other units. Cavalry. Charges have been slightly adjusted to give the player 1 to 1.5 seconds response time controlling cavalry units, making them able to run through better and not get stuck in enemy regiments as much. Bullets. All gun units had a tiny increase to bullet penetration and a slight increase to muzzle velocity to reflect gunpowder projectiles moving faster than arrows. Unit sizes, as mentioned before. Increased unit size by 50% for low to mid regiments of those factions often mentioned as countless, to properly reflect the vast hordes and provide a new challenge for order factions. Monsters, constructs, artillery, weapon teams, elite, foot rider regiments, and so on remain unchanged, and stats are unchanged as well. The factions included with this are Norska, Greenskins, Skaven, Beastmen, Vampire Counts, and Vampire Coast, Noblars, and Chaos Dwarf, Goblin, and Greenskin units. I contemplated Chaos, but they are probably too strong. I completely agree with that, by the way, for what it's worth. Perfect Vigor has been added to units where it made sense, like tanks, gyrocopters, elemental bears, zombies, skeletons, constructs, like Tomb King's ones, Rogue Idol, Flayers, and Doom Wheels. Physical resistance. All ethereal ghost units, heroes, and lords had their physical resistance increased from 45% to 75%. Keep in mind that any resistance can never go higher than 90%. It is hard-coded, despite what the UI says, meaning you can have someone with 115% ward save, but in reality it's really only 90%. Fatigue. Fatigue stages are shown in battle, only in the campaign, not in skirmish mode. The stats are vanilla, except I added charge debuff and removed armor and mass debuff. The different stages stack. Ammo replenishment. Ammo abilities will display how much they actually replenish. As you can see, a lot of work went into this, and these are some intriguing changes that are worth trying out for yourself to see if you like them. There's so many of them that I can't possibly show examples of all of them, and again, I think we all subjectively might like some of them and maybe not like all of them, but that's why I encourage you to check that out for yourself. And finally, that brings us to Siege Realism. Again, in the background, you can see my assault on the walls with Archaon. I'm going to let this play while I'm reading through the mod page. Fortifications hit points are increased for towers, and these are broken up between stone and wood. Walls, which are divided up between corners and straight walls, and other parts by varying amounts. Again, look at the mod page for specifics on that. Tower's shooting arc has been changed to a 180-degree angle. This is upscaled from Vanilla's 90-degree angle. Siege constructs. Battering rams and siege towers have their hit points increased or decreased, respectively. Siege towers are much more vulnerable to tower fire, and battering rams reflect their resistance to projectiles. Ladders, and this is another one I love. Climbing ladders has half the vanilla value added to the climbing speed, making this slower. Climbing ladders has likewise had half the vanilla value added to climbing exhaustion, making units more tired. Incentive to holding the fortification walls. A new beneficial boon has been added to walls, affecting defenders on a somewhat realistic mindset. This will stack with current vanilla boon. Capture points. Defenders can hold any one capture point of their choosing and stay in the battle. It no longer has to be the main one. Defenders will lose the battle instantly if all capture points are controlled at the same time by the attacker, and bleeding tickets are removed. Defensive buildings. Defensive supplies are a set amount and will no longer tick while the battle has commenced, so use them carefully. Defensive towers' prices have changed, and so have barricades. AI. AI has a 40% chance each turn that it will sally out to fight when a minor or unwalled settlement is encircled. AI will siege a settlement between 4 and 6 turns before attacking with siege equipment. And finally, attrition. Attrition starts ticking for the besieged after 3 turns to reflect disease and food and water shortages. Attrition should likewise begin for the besieger after 4 turns at a lower percentage. So looking again at the video in the background, you can see my assault on the walls with Archaon. This is not a repeat of the footage in my recent Fixing Siege Battles video. This is a comparison to show how similarly Siege Realism behaves compared to the suggestions I made in that video. Again, it makes launching an unprepared frontal assault on the walls extremely challenging and punishing, and again, we only win this battle because of Archaon himself. I also want to be clear that this fight is once again made much more difficult than it should be because of this extremely frustrating gate bug that exists in the vanilla game that no modder can fix. It's going to need to be CA, and it's pretty damn embarrassing that they never have. Anyway, just want to make sure no one gets the impression that this is a problem with the mod. What we see is that ladder climbing is slow, the fatigue it causes is worse than vanilla, and the defenders are incentivized to fight on the walls because of the buffs they get while there. All of these are changes that I approve of. So let's wrap all this up. My conclusion is that I really liked most of the changes in this overhaul and can see using it again in a Let's Play series, but with the caveat that I probably would bump the difficulty down to very hard just to mitigate the overly punishing control mechanic and the rebellions. If I can get the mod author to see this video, then I hope he will consider my feedback to take a second look at this. I tried to balance the length of this video with going into enough detail to do the mod justice and give you a sense of what it does. I welcome feedback on whether you prefer more or less detail in these showcases in the future. Anyway, you've listened to me ramble on long enough. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. It helps me know where to focus my time and also helps get these videos in front of other players since I'm still a small channel. Thanks as always for watching and listening, and I will see you in the next video.